The war for the galaxy raged on, as pieces on the board moved on all cylinders. A large-scale droid invasion at a coastal rebel base had resulted in a long-lasting battle. The rebels had set up valiant defenses and managed to hold the incoming droids at bay for many hours, but in the end, they had to succumb to the overmight of the droids before Republic reinforcements could arrive. On Kashyyyk, a small-scale mission was set up to secure mapping data on the whereabouts of large Imperial bases, coastal guns, and fortified bunkers. The Republic commandos, who were escorted by shadow troopers and Wookiees, successfully achieved this and more by also retrieving information from the Imperial databanks that were set up around the crash site for network communication. The Imperial units had sent in counterforce to stop them, but many of the shadow troopers and clone commandos were able to evacuate Kashyyyk in the end. Many of the Wookiees joined them, since they did not have the technology to outrun the Imperial speeder bikes, and most of the Kashyyyk locals joined the rebel forces next. The Republic now had a chance to pinpoint a good entry site to organize a counterattack on Kashyyyk if one was to be launched. In the meantime, there were rebels who volunteered to be sent over there and help the Wookiee population, but their numbers were too small to make a real difference and only slowed the inevitable down. But with the recent excursion on Kashyyyk by the clones, the Empire had set their defenses all around Kashyyyk on full alert. Attacking now would be a mistake, since it would surely end in another bloodbath. Thus, several campaigns were set up in a short time span, mostly to create a distraction and avert the eyes of the Empire in order to force them to spread out their units or to have them believe that the Republic's focus lay elsewhere. One of these diversion campaigns would be sent over to Mygeeto, a sector currently controlled by the CIS. The other would be launched on Geonosis, in another sector that was controlled by the droids. They hoped that these attacks on the droids would fool the Empire, but besides those planets, another attack plan had been made up for another reason. Captain Rex, leader of the mighty 501st, had seen the darkness of the Sith and their old Republic knights, and had left a deep impression on him. Rex lost some of his best men to those vicious warriors, and deep down, Rex feared those Sith more than any other faction. From the data retrieved from Kashyyyk, a small note of information was recovered that mentioned a conflict between Darth Malak and the droids on Mustafar a few years ago. Captain Rex did not have much in terms of information about the Sith, and thus every little bit helped. He ordered a strike force to descend to Mustafar and attack the nearest droid facility where the alleged conflict took place. Rex would not conduct the operation. He was needed elsewhere by the Jedi Council because of both upcoming military campaigns and the encounter with the Sith. Unlike the operation on Kashyyyk, these clones would not go in stealthily. They had walker support if needed, but the terrain was too uneven and narrow for that to be an option closer to the base. Their goal was to enter the facility and retrieve any information about the Sith. The clones had two possible entry points. The rear entrance was less guarded, but the rock formation outside made it impossible for the clones to spread out. It could potentially become a massacre if they could not take the bridge and frontal area in a matter of minutes. But none of the 501st objected. For many of the soldiers it was personal too. The Sith had killed their fellow brothers, so retribution was a given. The clones soon found themselves under fire from the droids that were across a small bridge and further down the defensive area near the entrance. The one heavy turret the droids had stationed there turned to fire at the white mass of clone troopers that headed for a little cover they could find. With the clones bunched up, many of the droids did not even have to aim. All they needed to do was point their blasters forward and pull the trigger. They would always hit something. Some of the droids started heading around to flank the units. Amongst the clones it was chaos, but not to the point where fear broke out. There was just a lot of shouting, and giving orders, and enemy positions. A few of the clones had already fallen, but many were returning fire, destroying clanker after clanker. The real big problem was the giant turret. Despite the clones having heavy weaponry, they were not able to destroy the turret, which kept hammering on them and chipping away more cover. A few of the clones were simply pinned down by it, desperately screaming for an airstrike to be called in. It was too close to both the facility's database and the clones to make that call. Despite the clones gaining some ground here and there, with more droids destroyed, it by now started to look a lot more bleak. Towards the front, a lot of that clones were lying all over the floor, mixed with those prone and crawling over their fellow soldiers' bodies and using them as cover. Amongst the officers, disagreements started to arise. There were those who believed this fight would end up in spilling more blood than necessary, that they could call in an ATXT or ATTE to destroy that cannon. Others even said that they should cut off the attack and launch an assault on the front, which was better protected. They could have multiple walkers with them. The disagreement between the officers came at the expense of the regular infantry, as they were simply still fighting for every foot of ground. More and more droids were destroyed. Some of the clones' morale was actually pretty high, until they took a good look around and saw many of those they knew lay lifeless on the ground. To others, this fueled them with rage, making a few reckless risks that in the end paid off and pushed the clones further towards the entrance. They ended up taking the bridge and heading onto the clearing that the droids were trying to protect. It came at a heavy cost though. There were still officers who wanted the clones to retreat and attack the other entry point. But by now too many had died for that to happen. They were close to seizing this place and entering the base. But an attack on the front using reserves and some light walkers was greenlit to avoid the droids at that area to come and reinforce inside the facility. The 501st who fought there had taken enough hits and needed a break. They now would be sent in to find any data regarding the Sith.